Next on the agenda will be House File 3635 and House File 3638. So I'll invite Pelsby back to the table. And then, as soon as they're ready here, I'm going to represent Vice Chair Hill to move and present each bill in order. So again, to the testifiers, when you're ready, if you would state your name for the record and proceed with your presentation. And Representative Hill, let's see. I'm sorry. We're going to let Pelsby start. I'm sorry. Go ahead. So whoever would like to start first, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chair Bennett.
Hill.
Like to move House File 3635 before the committee to be laid over. And I do want to introduce, once again, Dr. Yelena Bailey, who's going to walk through the provisions of the bill.
Thank you. So Representative Hill moves House File 3635 before the committee with the chair's intention to lay it over for further consideration at a later date. So Representative Hill and partners there, if you would present your bill.
Slight technical difficulties, Chair Bennett and members, but I think
It's okay.
here we
Take
go.
your time because we had paper difficulties earlier.
We're
so.
finally here. So I will do a brief walkthrough of the Interstate Teacher Mobility Compact. I believe that's first up. This shows you a map of where legislation has been introduced or passed across the country. So this is still something that's in movement. I see looks of confusion. Hopefully I'm on the right track. Chair Bennett.
Yeah. All right. I'm just distracted today. Dr. Bailey, did you have,
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
we're all set?
Yep. So this compact is much like other occupational compacts in that it would allow some flexibility for teachers to move amongst the member states. It does have a few things that make it distinct, and so I'll just highlight those here. Instead of someone using their out-of-state license to teach in Minnesota, for example, a teacher would be issued a license in the member state. And so that retains a lot of Minnesota's sovereignty and authority over licenses and data, which I'll mention as I do a very, very brief walkthrough of this language. A couple of key pieces here is to be eligible for the compact. A license has to have 3 qualities. It has to require a bachelor's degree with the exception of career and technical education. It has to require completion of state-approved teacher preparation, and then it must be unencumbered, meaning it can't be limited or restricted in terms of renewal or term. So, yes? Perfect, thank you. Article 1 of this simply defines the purpose of the compact to increase teacher mobility across states. Article 2 just outlines some of the key terms and definitions for participation in the compact. And then Article 3 describes the model of reciprocity between member states that join the compact. One thing I should say as I'm moving through this is language that was developed originally from the Department of Defense to support military spouses, then taken on by the Council of State Governors, and it has to be adopted in whole without changes by each member state in order to be effective. If there are any changes, it is null and void. So you'll notice in that map, some states where it's kind of grayed out because they introduced the legislation or passed it with changes, and so they're not actually eligible to be a part of the compact. Article 4 simply highlights a few cases where states maintain their authority. So for example, this has 0 change on our ability to have renewal requirements, additional requirements on renewal for a teacher who comes in through the compact and gets licensed in Minnesota. We can require additional documentation for the purposes of salary schedule. That's common in other states, not so much here. The state maintains ownership over the licensing data, and then any existing reciprocity agreements maintain their authority. Article 5 simply outlines the requirements to use those, and I mentioned those before, what makes a license eligible for the compact. So they have to, in addition to meeting those 3 criteria, they have to undergo a state background check in whichever state they're getting their license in. And then if that state requires additional information for the sake of compensation, they must provide that as well. Article 6 simply states that member states retain authority over discipline, so it has 0 impact on our ability to conduct our ethics investigations. Article 7 just outlines the authority of the commission, and that's a governing body that helps facilitate this compact across the member states. Article 8 outlines rulemaking authority of the compact, and again, if a state decides that they want to vote to modify that authority or those rules, that can happen at the state legislature level. So there's lots of built-in guarantees of state sovereignty. Article 9 requires that the commission helps facilitate this across the states. Article 10 has some things that ensure compliance with the compact and procedures if a member state fails to be in compliance with the rules of the compact. Article 11 simply outlines the enactment date and terms for withdrawal or amendment. Article 12 outlines the relationship of this compact with state constitutions and the federal constitution. And then Article 13 just reiterates that teachers are still subject to the member state's scope and jurisdiction of practice. And that is my very, very quick walkthrough of that bill. Happy to answer member questions.
You did a good job with that, Dr. Bailey. And what I'm going to have you do, and I'm sorry to be confusing or if it makes it more difficult, but I'm going to have you continue your presentation. So we'll get that done just for time's sake. Then we'll discuss each bill. You know, we'll start with 36, 35, but go ahead and continue your presentation if you would on the other bill as well. And then we'll, pardon?
Thank you,
Oh,
Dr.
excuse me, wait 1 second here. Excuse me as a chair.
I have thank you, Madam Chair. I have a procedural question. This bill is currently on the table before us. Do we need to lay it over and pick up the other bill, or she's just going to speak? We're all good?
Yeah,
Okay, great,
we'll have
thanks.
excuse me, thank you. We'll have the presentation, but then we will go back to the original bill that's already on the table here, or whatever the proper wording is for that, and go on. But go ahead and finish giving us information, and then we'll go from there. Thank you. And good question, Chair Jordan.
Okay, great. Happy to speak to our agency bill, Chair Bennett, members. So this is a pretty simple bill in terms of operations, and then there are a few pieces that I know Representative Mueller kind of signaled to around the renewal requirement, and then something that helps with out-of-state reciprocity. So sections 1 through 3 are operational. This would move the voluntary paraprofessional credential to MTE. We continue to carry this in our agency bill simply because we do not have staff or expertise on anything related to non-licensed staff. So as I mentioned, we're a staff of 26 when fully staffed compared to our larger sibling over at MDE. So in alignment with their jurisdiction and capacity, it makes more sense for this to sit with them. Section 4 would allow us to enter into a data sharing agreement with BOSA, the Board of School Administrators. We currently have a data sharing agreement with MDE, and sometimes for the sake of checking compliance or being able to license their school administrators, they need access to data on assignments, but because it's private until we publish it, they can't get that data, which of course delays things for our school administrators. So this is simple, allowing us to enter into a data sharing agreement with them. Section 5 would allow PELSB to add forfeiture fees to our operations budget, and I believe, I don't know if the language carried over here from the Senate, but this would be used for our IT needs. So the government relations from Minute was here, but had to unfortunately leave, but would speak to the fact that ongoing maintenance for our system, once it's finally built, will be more significant than they anticipated. So in an effort to not have to ask you all for more money, this is one way that we could address that need. We get forfeiture fees each year because unfortunately, there are a significant number of, or a few hundred, I should say, applicants who don't complete their applications. So when someone starts an application, they're notified, these are non-refundable fees. They have 60 days to complete their application. We reach out, encourage folks to complete those applications, but last fiscal year, we had about 800 individuals who just didn't complete them. And so the licensing fee portion goes back to the general fund, but the background fee, which is about that $30, sits in a special expense account. And so we are requesting to be able to use that towards IT. And it's not a significant amount, I should say, that was about $26,000 last fiscal year. So the next section is about addressing the mental health training for our teachers. As we know, there's increasing needs, both our students and our teachers, around mental health. One of the changes is just technical for section 6 and 8 to replace mental illness with a more holistic term, mental health. And then section 9, as Representative Mueller spoke to before, really clarifies some of that language for the existing requirement, and then would prompt us to do rulemaking to really flesh out, again, what should be included in those existing trainings. Section 7 is about removing barriers to licensure, and so this would change the eligibility for Tier 2 to include teachers who are in an out-of-state program with aligned requirements in student teaching. And this for us is a bit of an equity piece. So once someone completes a program that's out of state, as long as there's equivalent student teaching, they get a license here immediately as long as they've met the testing requirements. So it seems that it would be only reasonable to do the same thing if they are enrolled in a program for a tier 2. We see this often, for example, in Moorhead, where someone might want to work in Moorhead schools but is enrolled in a program across the border in Fargo but can't get that tier 2 license right now. We don't anticipate this being a large number of individuals, but we have heard anecdotally from districts and partners that this would help meet some of those shortage needs. We think it would be particularly useful in some areas where we don't have licensure programs in Minnesota, so blind and visually impaired, for example, we don't have any licensure programs. Someone who wants to enroll out of state and practice in Minnesota would help fill those needs. Section 10 is simply a time extension. We promise we're not requesting additional funds. A few years ago, you all at the legislature granted us the funds needed to get off of paper applications, knock on wood one day, and be able to have an online licensing system that helps expedite licensing for all of our teachers. We've been working with Minute on this, and we're able to come to the conclusion we need a third-party vendor for this work, and so they need an extension to be able to get the RFP going and get that work done. So this will provide an extra 2 years for them to use those funds and get that system built out. And that concludes the hopefully also very brief walkthrough of that bill.
Very good, thank you. So the idea here is to have the presentation, and then we'll have Representative Hill. Now you've already moved your bill, House File 3635, so I'm going to have you introduce your actual bill now, Representative Hill. And this is the one on the teacher compact. So if you have anything to add, I guess, that'd be my question.
No,
Or do you want to
thank you.
leave it at this?
Thank you, Chair Bennett. I would move the adoption or laying over House File 3635, please.
All right, thank you. So I do know we have two testifiers for 3635, Valerie Doslin and Patrick Baker, if you could come forward. And then, once there, you can identify yourself for the record, and please keep your comments to about 2 minutes. So Ms. Doslin, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Valerie Dosland. I am here on behalf of the Minnesota Association of School Administrators, the Minnesota Administrators for Special Education, and then my colleagues with the School Boards Association and the Association of Metropolitan School Districts also wanted me to let the committee know they support both the bills before you today. In regards to the Teacher Mobility Compact, the Minnesota schools, you've heard about the struggle that they have with teacher shortages, and it is becoming increasingly difficult to fill critical classroom positions, especially in the areas of special education. While our school administrators are committed to ensuring that every student has a qualified licensed teacher in front of them, too often districts are often forced to rely on long-term substitutes, out-of-field permissions, or leave positions unfilled because there simply are not enough licensed educators available. These shortages directly affect students' access to consistent support, individualized services, and the stable relationships they need to succeed. So the Interstate Compact, I just want to point out 3 things. 1, it eliminates barriers for teachers with valid licenses from other compact states to receive a Minnesota license more quickly. It supports our district's ability to recruit talent and fill positions, and it maintains high standards for teachers as they must still hold meaningful licensure and meet professional requirements. So I just encourage you to support that proposal. In regards to House File 3638, I just wanted to highlight our support for the provision that would allow more flexibility for a Tier 2 teacher to be enrolled in a teacher prep program, whether it's here in Minnesota or out of state. This proposal expands options for Tier 2 teachers to enroll in programs that best fit their location, schedule, and professional needs, even if those programs are based out of state. And the Executive Director Bailey mentioned this isn't affect too many teachers, but we do hear from superintendents about this needed flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Baker, introduce yourself for the record if you would and begin.
Thank you, Chair Bennett, Chair Jordan. My name is Patrick Baker. I have the pleasure of leading government relations for the School of Education at Western Governors University. In addition to my day job, I also serve as a elected school board member in Mankato Area Public Schools, and so really excited to be here in my home state testifying on behalf of WGU. Similar to my colleague, Ms. Dolson, I'll just talk about both bills because we are supportive of both. But before I dive into that, just a brief word on WGU. As you may not know who we are, but Western Governors University was founded about 30 years ago now by 19 Western governors to be a nonprofit, affordable, online university with a specific mission, and that is to create pathways to opportunity for working adult learners. One of the key differentiators for WGU is that our programs are entirely competency-based. So we hold learning constant and time variable. WGU now enrolls more than 200,000 students seeking degrees and certificates in healthcare, business, IT, and teaching, and we have more than 425,000 graduates now across the country. But it is teaching that brings me to you today, and WGU operates the largest teachers college in the country with 45,000 students currently enrolled. Last year alone, our School of Education graduated nearly 20,000 individuals across the country, including 270 right here in Minnesota. We are proud to be the only teacher college in the country that actually licenses in all 50 states, and that we are accredited by both of the major national accreditors for programs of education, CAPE and AQUIP. Our footprint in Minnesota is significant and unique. We currently have about 300 Minnesotans enrolled in programs leading to initial teacher licensure at WGU, but these are not your typical college students. They're working adults who reflect the modern teacher workforce. 70% of our students in teacher licensure are over 25, 80% are working while enrolled at WGU, and 85% transferred in prior college credit. Most importantly for this committee, WGU is a vital pipeline for greater Minnesota. 46% of our initial licensure students reside in rural areas in Minnesota, and we have students living in 69 of Minnesota's 87 counties. With respect to Tier 2 and the agency bill, strongly support the bill that would create that eligibility for students enrolled in out-of-state approved programs to be eligible for Tier 2 licenses. So currently, despite our students being eligible to apply directly to Pellsby to a Tier 3 license upon their graduation, as Director Bailey indicated, they are barred from accessing a Tier 2 license while they train to be a teacher. And so this exclusion creates an equitable barrier for Minnesotans who are in need of these pathways the most. Specifically, we have 80 students in Minnesota who enter WGU with a non-teaching bachelor's degree. And because they cannot access a Tier 2 license, their pathway to the classroom is less accessible than their peers at in-state institutions. So for us, this is creating real-world problems for some partnerships we're working to do here in Minnesota. With respect to SPED pipeline grants that are run out of MDE, WGU is actively eligible and actively participating partner, higher ed institution in that. So we have run into issues where our SPED pipeline candidates who are receiving state dollars to get trained as a teacher are unable to access these programs, and that's becoming more and more problematic for us. In addition, we are in advanced talks right now with Teach for America Twin Cities to do a partnership with some of their teacher cadets. And again, these are all folks with bachelor's degrees who would want to enroll in a teacher prep program to stay teachers and become teachers. And that Tier 2 barrier is a barrier for our students to participate in that Teach for America partnership. So today we need more teachers than ever. Both Minnesota-based approved programs and out-of-state can play a really unique role in supporting the state's teacher pathways. And I would just say, you know, in respect to the Teacher Mobility Compact, it's very supportive of the bill. As an institution that operates nationwide licenses in all 50 states, we see firsthand how licensure barriers prevent qualified teachers from filling vacancies where they are needed most. And so the compact can preserve Minnesota's high standards for teacher prep while ensuring that qualified teacher candidates in one state can seamlessly become a qualified teacher here in Minnesota. So thanks for the opportunity to be before you today, and happy to answer any questions if you have those. But
Thank you, and thanks for the testifiers for kind of doing your homework right while you're up there. We can save some time from the up and down, and Mr. Shaver, when the next bill comes up, we'll get you up here too. So members, thank you to the testifiers, and I don't have any testifiers, I don't think, left here for this particular bill, which we're just going to talk about, the Teacher Compact bill right now. So I do want to direct your attention, members, to some of the materials provided in your folders regarding the proposed compact. Do we have any member questions on just this portion, 3635, the Teacher Compact proposal here? We've got Representative Lawrence.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Representative Hill, quick question. I don't know if a testifier answer this question or not, but as we look at joining this compact and the possibility of being a part of a compact like this, for us as a state, would there be any additional requirements of an educator to teach in Minnesota? Would there be any additional classes, any additional hours that they may have to take if we were able to join this?
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Chair Bennett. And just speaking from my own experience, the answer is no. My own experience, my wife's career took us shortly after I started my teaching career to Pennsylvania, suburban Philadelphia. And the amount of gymnastics I had to engage in to get a Pennsylvania license to teach during those 10 weeks of summer was quite a bit. And so what we're seeking to do here is to remove barriers that would allow educators to enter into our state and serve our students here.
Representative Lawrence, any follow-up? Okay.
Thank you.
Representative Green.
Thank you so much, Chair Bennett. And thank you so much, Rep. Hill, for bringing this bill forward. I think it's great. I think it's a really creative way to just lower the barriers, as you said. I was just curious about any kind of data or research that's been done on how many teachers move around from state to state and what that looks like.
Dr. Bailey, it looks like you're going to take that one. Would you like to?
Chair Bennett, members, we don't have that in front of me, but the compact has its own website with some resources, and I believe they do have some of the data on there, as well as the Council of State Governors has some data on that as well. So happy to chat offline and see if I can find some of that for you.
Good to go. Chair Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have two questions. My first one is for Dr. Bailey. It's great that there are not additional barriers for Minnesota, for people who want to become a Minnesota educator, but are we missing anything by joining this compact? Like, kind of the opposite question. Are we missing anything in licensure if someone is, we have different licensure standards in other states? I'll pick on my sister-in-law who teaches in Nebraska. If she comes and teaches in Minnesota, is there something that by having her Nebraska teaching license, she's missing out on if she were to become a Minnesota educator that is important to us?
Dr. Bailey?
Chair Bennett, members, great question. So for all practical purposes, because of the work you all have done over the last few years to streamline out of state, this mostly would just reduce kind of the paperwork barriers so that you can, instead of having to ask for transcripts and all of that information, they could just do the background check and immediately get their license. But because it has the same bar for all of the eligible licenses, we're not having any concerns about kind of high quality moving either out or into Minnesota.
Great. And then thank you, Madam Chair. And then I had a question for Mr. Baker.
Mr. Baker, go ahead and come on back up. And go ahead, Chair Jordan.
Yep, thank you for coming back, Mr. Baker, and please let me know if there's a better title for you. But I had a question I'm looking at your written testimony and what you said about Teach for America and how you're partnering with Teach for America. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that and how entering this compact is essential to that? And then will this lead to an increase in Teach for America candidates teaching in Minnesota schools?
Mr. Baker.
So a couple things there. WGU just entered a national partnership with Teach for America where we are now going district by district, region by region, and working with TFA sort of regions across the country. And the idea there, right, is these TFA candidates are coming in with a bachelor's degree. They're teaching on some sort of, usually it's a temporary license as they are going through that process. And those that choose to become teachers and stick around oftentimes need to go back to a teacher prep program to get that full teacher prep license. And so what we are doing is providing an opportunity for them to go to a fully online competency-based university so that they can work their Teach for America job full-time, get their degree, and come out at the end with a fully blown license in that state that allows them to continue on beyond the sort of Teach for America initial core experience. So in Minnesota, with our inability to access Tier 2, that provides more of a challenge for our students because once they enroll at WGU, if they're in a TFA experience here, they've got to try and get a Tier 1 license. And obviously we know there are more barriers with that, and there's time limits and things like that. And so with the Tier 2 piece, those TFA candidates in particular, but not just TFA, anyone that's got a bachelor's degree that's trying to come back to school would be able to access those pathways to Tier 3 a bit more easy. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. And Chair Jordan says she's good to go, so thank you. Good questions. Representative Hill, any closing comments?
No, the Interstate Compact is before you to be laid over, and I fully support it.
Thank you, Representative Hill. And with that, the chair lays over House File 3635 for future consideration at a later date.